After severing ties, Ella's parents left her without a home. One day, her mother, Linda, and father, Mark, approached her with a question. Would you like a new sibling? Clutching her only doll tightly, Ella firmly shook her head. She had no desire for a brother or sister. Ignoring her feelings, they handed her over to her grandparents and, a year later, returned with a plump baby brother named Ethan. Linda assured Ella that Ethan would be her future companion, her source of support, and her backup plan once she married. However, before Ella even reached 18, Ethan was diagnosed with leukemia. She found herself forced into the operating room, where icy needles repeatedly pierced her bone marrow. As Ethan's kidneys began to fail, Linda signed the consent form for Ella to donate her own kidneys. Ella knelt, claiming she had a bleeding disorder, but the medical staff accused her of lying, labeled her as unfeeling, and had the nurse sedate her. Ultimately, she bled out on the sterile operating table. When she regained consciousness, Linda was radiating maternal love. Crouched before her. Sweetie Ella, there's a new baby on the way for Mommy. Would you like a playmate? She held two Ultraman action figures. Nearby stood a gleaming blue crib that Mark had recently purchased. Looking at the only pink bunny doll in her chubby little hands, Ella realized she was back. This time, she vowed not to serve as a blood donor for Ethan or be emotionally manipulated by her parents. Mark's enthusiastic voice echoed, "There's a new baby on Mommy's way. You won't have to sleep alone anymore." He had said the same things years ago, but after Ethan's birth, she felt lonelier than ever. No more bedtime tales from Linda. No more cuddling on Mark's lap. In an instant, she became invisible. They expected her to be mature, to care for Ethan, to exemplify the role of an older sister. They conveyed these expectations to a 5-year-old. They expected her to suppress jealousy and wholeheartedly dedicate herself to her yet-to-be-born sibling. Even then, she sensed a loss beginning to take root. Fearful, she expressed her desire to be their only child. But Linda grew angry, berating her, saying, "Girls are so jealous. Not only did you take Dad's attention, now you want to take from your brother too?" Ella didn't understand. She only saw her mother's anger. She wept, saying she wanted a brother to play with. Then Linda smiled and whispered to Mark. Ella recalled reading about a girl pushing her pregnant mother down the stairs out of envy. They decided to send her to live with her grandparents until Ethan was born. They named the unborn child Ethan, suggesting he would inherit everything. Memories swirled as darkness clouded her vision. Linda believed Ella didn't understand and placed her hand on her belly. "There's a new life in here. It could be a brother or sister. Are you excited?" Mark added, "One daughter is enough. I'd love a son to protect our Ella." He had spoken the same words before. Ella truly believed her brother would protect her and become her friend, so she looked forward to it. However, after Ethan was born, he despised her, hurled toys at her, and destroyed her only Barbie doll. When she complained, her parents retorted, "Didn't you want a brother to play with? He's just a baby, can't you be more understanding?" They repeated the same lines throughout her childhood, even when they sacrificed her life. Now, looking at the baby items filling the room, Ella stated coldly, "You've already decided to have him? Why even ask me?" For a moment, her parents seemed at a loss for words. Silently, Ella turned, clutching her worn bunny doll, and ascended the stairs. Upstairs, a spacious, bright room had always been empty. Her parents claimed it was for guests, but now she realized it was intended for her unborn brother. Back in her cramped bedroom, tears streamed down her face. She had tried so hard to fit in, endured pain on numerous operating tables for them, yet they viewed it as her responsibility. Whenever she wished Linda would comfort her during the pain, she was accused of immaturity, even yelled at. "If you hadn't asked for a brother, why would I have gotten pregnant again? He's here now. Take care of him." Ella clenched her fists, determined to escape this nightmare. After much contemplation, she concluded that her parents didn't love her. Since her birth, she had lacked special care from them. Linda's teachings emphasized being sensible, frugal, obedient, and ladylike. Ella never dared to express her needs except when she cried for a bunny doll at 3 years old, resulting in her mother slapping her and leaving her in a stall, where she cried the entire morning. Mark eventually bought the bunny earnestly, explaining that Linda didn't work to care for her as supporting the family alone was difficult. This bunny could have bought a pound of braised pork. Don't blame her. She wants you to be sensible. The 3-year-old Ella understood nothing, only thinking they were extremely poor. She apologized and promised not to ask for toys again. But back then, Linda wore expensive dresses. Mark smoked high-end cigars, and Ethan received new toys monthly. They wouldn't have gone bankrupt over a cheap bunny doll. They simply didn't want to spend on her or give her love. Sure enough, Linda knocked on her door early the next morning. She feigned upset. Ella, I have a new baby on the way, so I can't take care of you right now. Can you stay at Grandma and Grandpa's for a few days? Ella looked at her coldly and asked, Is it really just a few days? Linda was momentarily taken aback by Ella's straightforward gaze, but continued, Of course. Once I feel better, I'll bring you back home. Upon hearing that, Ella stopped looking at her mother. She turned, grabbed her small backpack, packed a few clothes and her only doll inside, and said, Let's go. It was Linda who had asked her to leave, but once Ella got into the car, Linda began to cry. Let Mark drive you. It'll hurt me to watch you go. Anyone witnessing this might think she genuinely cared about Ella. In reality, she felt guilty toward her. What was supposed to be a few days away extended to at least a year. The car journeyed from the highway to a secluded mountain road, finally approaching the familiar dilapidated village. Mark calmly instructed, Be good with Grandpa and Grandma. Help out as much as you can. Don't be stubborn, and call me if you need anything. Ella held a watch phone. She stared at it for a while and asked, Will Mark really answer? Mark was confused, of course. Sweetheart, why wouldn't I? Don't worry. Even with a little brother, I still love Ella the most. Stay with Grandpa and Grandma, and I'll pick you up in a few days. Liar. In her past life, they sent her to live with her grandparents. Her uncle's young son bullied her, calling her unwanted. She cried and called Mark, but he only answered twice, each call lasting just a few seconds, claiming he was busy at work before hanging up quickly. In the first month, she called him 5 times, but he only responded twice. By the second month, he forgot to refill the minutes on the watch phone, so she couldn't make any calls. At that time, Ella thought she had broken the watch phone, blaming herself and crying alone, hoping they would come get her soon. After desperately waiting for a year and a half, Mark finally asked her uncle to bring her back to the city. The moment she entered the house, Linda wrinkled her nose in disgust. Ella, why do you smell like country manure? Didn't you bathe while you were living with your grandparents? As a 6-year-old, she felt utterly embarrassed, hiding her face, especially compared to her plump little brother. She was thin and small, resembling a little yellow monkey after a year in the countryside. No wonder Linda didn't like her. But didn't she end up like this because Linda sent her away? On the first day at her grandparents', her aunt was clearly unhappy. It's bad enough they don't raise their own child. Now they're dumping their little girl here. Uncle looked at her silently before turning back inside. Ella quietly squatted under the eaves with her backpack, drawing and writing by herself. They didn't like her, but Mark sent money for her expenses every month, so they wouldn't let her go hungry or cold. She wouldn't cry and hoped her parents would change, unlike in her previous life. I'll take good care of myself this time and work towards independence, she vowed. It wasn't until nightfall that Grandpa and Grandma returned from the fields. They didn't recognize her, so she approached them and said, Grandpa, Grandma, I'm Ella. I'm here to be with you. Grandma lovingly pulled her into a hug and Grandpa grinned, inviting her inside for some cookies. That night she lay on a bamboo mat, feeling Grandma's fan. Grandpa looked at her and sighed deeply. Tears welled up in her eyes. She promised herself she'd repay them this time. She wouldn't let them die tragically again, unlike before. It took over a year for Linda and Mark to bring her back home. Surprisingly, this time, they came to get her themselves. Ethan lay plump in Linda's arms as she focused on feeding him. She casually asked if Ella had behaved well with Grandpa and Grandma. Uncle and Aunt beamed at the gifts Mark had brought, praising Ella for being sensible and diligent, even saying she knew many words for her age. Upon hearing that, Linda smiled and said, Our son takes after you. Ella was a class monitor at school. Mark was happy, playfully teasing Ethan. Your big sister is smart. I'm sure you will be too. They planned to take her back to the city for school, but Ella didn't want to return. She said, I want to stay here with Grandpa and Grandma. Grandma was shocked and reluctant. Yet she said, go with your parents. The city has better schools. You'll start soon and shouldn't delay. Grandpa also urged, village teachers can discipline you, while city teachers will give you candy. Grandma, stronger than her, directly pushed her into Mark's car. Come visit during the holidays, silly child. Once the car started, Linda's smile vanished instantly. You've gone wild in the countryside, haven't you? You don't even want to come home. So young and avoiding school, just climbing trees and catching shrimp. Can't you be more ladylike? Ella wanted to argue, but there seemed to be no point. Linda had already labeled her in her mind. When she didn't reply, Linda seemed even more smug. Cat got your tongue? Did I get you? Mark pretended to be kind. All right, it's her first day back. Don't upset her. Linda huffed and focused on playing with Ethan with a toy car, not talking to Ella again. Back home, there was a car-shaped cake on the table and lots of baby-friendly food. As soon as they sat down, Linda announced, this cake is especially for you to celebrate your return. Your brother doesn't even have one. Ella laughed coldly and sighed. Ethan didn't have one because he was too young to eat cake. Besides, they said the cake was for her. But wasn't the design meant for boys with the little car and all? Candles were lit. Ella was about to blow them out when Linda stopped her. Ethan can't eat cake. Let him blow out the candles. You'll have the whole cake afterward. Ella stayed still, watching her mother help her 1-year-old brother blow out the candles. The baby couldn't figure out how to blow, just drooled all over the cake and smashed it with his little fists in excitement. Linda glanced quickly at her. Seeing she wasn't angry, Linda turned back, smiling and praising. Our son is so strong. What a champ. Quietly observing, Ella thought sarcastically, of course he's strong. He can barely walk yet knocked out that expensive dog's eyes with a toy gun. He's practically a Hercules. When she got home, she always worked hard on her studies. But occasionally, Linda would make sarcastic remarks her way. What's the point of a girl studying so hard? You're better off helping me with the dishes or playing with your little brother. Ella ignored her. She focused on her books and eagerly participated in all sorts of competitions. During winter and summer breaks, she'd visit her grandparents in the countryside on her own. Over time, Linda realized they weren't exactly close. She grew even colder toward Ella, sometimes outright ignoring her. If this had been a past life during her teen years, she might have fallen into depression, feeling anxious all the time. But now, it was like it didn't bother her anymore. Everything changed in 6th grade. Ethan burst into the house looking panicked and hid in his room, too scared to come out for dinner. Linda knocked on his door worriedly. Ethan, what's going on? Did something happen while you were out playing? But he stayed silent. Ella glanced at the date on the calendar. She knew he was scared because he'd just accidentally shot someone's beloved dog in the eye while outside. The dog owner was frantically searching for whoever did it. In a previous life, Ella wasn't home when this happened. When she returned that weekend, Linda blamed her, making Ella kneel before the pet owner, because she lied that Ella was the one who used the toy gun to blind the dog. Ella got slapped repeatedly by Linda and was forced to apologize to the dog while kneeling. People who knew her saw this, and word quickly spread among the kids. She was labeled as a horrible dog abuser, and everyone shunned her. Some extreme dog lovers even tricked her into going out, cornered her in the bathroom, beat her up, and forced her to drink toilet water. When she told her parents, they actually blamed her. Why would someone just hit you for no reason? You should think about what you did wrong. She reflected and realized she did nothing wrong. So this time, Ella strutted back home, deliberately standing in front of cameras for a while, making sure she didn't step out of the house. With proof on tape, even if Linda wanted to blame her, she couldn't. But she underestimated Linda's favoritism, worried that Ethan wouldn't eat. Linda opened the door with a key. Seeing him cry hysterically, she panicked. After some questioning, she found out he bragged to his friend about seeing a wild boar. He shot the gun only to realize it was someone's dog. The dog owner was infamous for being a nightmare to deal with. Even Linda frowned. That dog belongs to Mrs. Thompson, the wife of a CEO, Wendy. Your dad works for her husband. Ethan started crying. "What are we going to do?" As he cried, a loud knock erupted on the door. "Come out! Your kid blinded my dog's eye. Where are your parents? Come out now! Don't pretend you don't know. I have the toy gun. This imported toy gun. Only you bought it in the whole city. Don't play dumb." Ella was in her room reading, quietly listening to the drama unfold outside. The moment Mrs. Thompson pounded on the door, Ethan's cries instantly stopped. Ella chuckled bitterly. "Already gone hiding, huh?" She was about to step out to watch the spectacle when Linda flung her door open, looking terrified. "It's my daughter who accidentally hit your dog, but she's just a kid. Please don't be too hard on her." A fancy-looking woman with blood on her hands stormed up and slapped Ella across the face. "Was it you who shot my dog with this gun?" Disbelieving, Ella looked to Linda. She sheepishly averted her eyes, only glancing back at Ella after a few seconds, begging with her eyes. The lady shouted angrily, "I've got blood all over. Do you have any idea how I felt rushing that dog to the hospital? Your kid's young, but does that mean my dog deserves it?" She yanked at Ella's clothes as if wishing she could kill her on the spot. Linda stood there, frozen in fear until Ella took a few more hits before she trembled and agreed, "I'll cover the vet bills. Just let my daughter go." Neighbors began to gather around, curiously peeking in. Linda, eyes darting, stepped forward, pushing Ella down onto her knees. "Apologize to Wendy. You hurt her dog. Do you know what that'll cost your father and me?" She whispered in Ella's ear. "Your brother's school background check isn't done yet. If he gets rejected from the private school because of this, you're going to be in big trouble." The neighbors around them started making comments. "Wendy's dog is a blue German shepherd. Just one pup costs tens of thousands. She spent so much raising it. This girl's in deep trouble. Tisk, tisk. Having a daughter like that must be karma from a past life." Ella always ran off to the countryside. Who knows if she picked up a habit of eating dogs like country folks? Ella tried to fight back, but at 12 years old, how could she break free from two adults? Linda restrained her, forcing her head down, covering her mouth. Wendy's temper cooled as Ella's forehead started to bleed from the forced bowing. Ella bit down hard on Linda's hand and shouted, "It wasn't me. I didn't do it." Wendy flared up, denying it. "There are cameras all over the community. Do you want me to pull out the evidence? One word from me, and your whole family will have to leave this place?" Ella tried telling her to check the surveillance footage, but Linda slapped her again. "Still lying after getting caught? Is this what your father and I taught you?" She covered Ella's mouth again, turning pitifully to Wendy. "No need to check, no need. We admit it." Hands trembling, Linda continued, "It's all because Ella didn't watch where she was aiming. I'll cover the medical fees right away, plus any follow-ups. Just please spare my daughter." As she spoke, tears began to fall. Onlookers couldn't help but sympathize. To clean up her troublemaker daughter's mess, she's paying money and losing face. Only a mother could do that. Women are weak, but as mothers, they become strong. Wendy, let's let this one go. More and more people urged Wendy to let it slide. Seeing Linda's sincerity, Wendy finally sighed, letting Ella go. Inside, Ella was boiling with rage. Motherly love? She certainly had it, just not for me. No, it was for Ethan, who was hiding next door. Even now, Linda kept Ella's mouth shut, terrified she'd expose her precious son for what he did. Ella stared at her, full of hatred and resentment. She swore she'd never call her mother again. Shortly after, Mark came home from work. As he walked up, he saw the crowd and looked puzzled. Seeing Wendy, he immediately put on a sycophantic smile. "What brings you here, Wendy? Is there something my boss needs?" Wendy gave him a cold stare and said nothing. Linda awkwardly said, "Ella blinded Wendy's beloved dog, and I'm begging Wendy to forgive her." Upon hearing that, Mark's eyes widened, and he said angrily, "She did something like that, and you're still pleading for her? Do you realize I'm up for a promotion, idiot? Just hand Ella over to Wendy. There's nothing to plead about." Mark was afraid the boss would find out about this and wanted to fix it quickly. Linda felt a little wronged by his harsh words, but she couldn't say anything in front of Wendy, knowing the real culprit was Ethan. Catching Ella's stubborn gaze, Mark scolded Linda. "Soft-hearted mothers spoil children." She never listens to you. Why are you defending her? As soon as Ella broke free, she dashed to the living room, grabbed a chair, and started smashing Ethan's door in a frenzy. Linda saw her intent and rushed to stop her. Driven by rage, Ella swung the chair at her, and Linda quickly dodged to avoid injury. That's when the door to Ethan's room fell open from Ella's blows. Mark was furious. "What's gotten into you?" But Ella didn't back down and hurled the chair at him. "Stay back!" Wendy was shocked, thinking Ella had suddenly lost it. She stared at him. "Stay back." Wendy was shocked, thinking Ella had suddenly lost it. However, she caught sight of the open room and was immediately taken aback by all the toy guns and even the bullet that hurt her dog. It was clear to her now, but Mark didn't realize it yet. He saw Ethan cowering in the corner, and his eyes turned red with pity. "Ella, stop. You're scaring your brother." Linda quickly made an excuse. "All our toys are in this room. Ella's room is too small and full of books. No space for toys." Ella trembled with rage. "Even now you're lying? I didn't even step outside. I wasn't the one who harmed the dog." Wendy's gaze lingered on her several times before she said, "Since your daughter refuses to confess, tie her up and make her kneel by the dog's bedside. She'll come back when the dog gets better." Seeing that Linda and Mark were determined to protect Ethan, even knowing legal consequences wouldn't affect him, Wendy chose to take it out on Ella directly. A hint of delight flashed in Linda's eyes. "I'll tie up this brat for you right away." To ensure Ethan could smoothly enter school, she willingly sacrificed Ella. Mark wasn't a fool. He understood Linda's intentions instantly. He took off his belt. "If you don't behave, I'll personally escort you to apologize." The thick belt was close to striking Ella. She saw Wendy smiling smugly as if she were an ant. With Linda pinning her to the ground, Ella couldn't escape. Even with all her strength, a feeling of deep helplessness brought tears to her eyes. Was I destined to be Ethan's scapegoat? A steady, authoritative male voice rang out, making everyone turn their heads. Wendy was visibly shocked. "Why are you here?" He ignored Wendy and instead took a few steps forward, pushing Linda off Ella. Behind him were several middle-aged men in suits and a cameraman. Seeing Ella's swollen cheek and pitiful state, tears filled his eyes. What did this child do? How can you beat her like this? He tried to help her up, but Ella kept falling back onto her legs. Looking down, she realized that during the struggle, her left leg had been broken by Linda, twisted into a horrifying shape. Linda covered her mouth, shaking her head frantically. "It wasn't me, Chief. I didn't mean to." Wendy immediately defended herself. "I didn't touch her." "I don't know about any of this." The chief shook his head. "This child is a national competition champion, the only talent from our city. Even if she did wrong, how could you be so cruel? It's not just about hitting her. You've broken her leg." "Are you even human?" The chief immediately called for an ambulance, but Ella suddenly raised her hand. "Wait!" Everyone looked at her as she spat blood and pointed at Linda and Mark. "Chief, I want to sever ties with them. They knew Ethan hurt Wendy's dog, but forced me to take the blame. I don't want parents like this. Please help me, Uncle." Previously, she was forced to kneel, but now she genuinely meant it. "I'm only 12 now. In 3 years, Ethan would be diagnosed with leukemia. Unless she escaped, Linda would eventually push her to the surgery table repeatedly until she died." Ella refused to follow the same path again. Her forehead, newly injured, began to bleed once more, moving everyone present. They all wondered why a 12-year-old would rather go to an orphanage than stay with her parents. Some sharp-eyed folks glanced into her shabby room. All there was in there were a broken bed and desk, surrounded by Ethan's basketball and toy guns, mops, and junk. The living room was filled with boys' toys, with no sign a girl lived there. People started whispering. "I heard these parents send the daughter to the countryside during breaks. She wears hand-me-downs while her brother sports all the brand names. Such blatant favoritism." Linda quickly defended herself, saying, "I never favored sons over daughters. I've always treated them equally. Don't say things like that." But the truth was clear. You can tell if parents love their child by whether they provide a comfortable living environment. In our over 100 square meter home, My tiny room was almost entirely taken over by clutter. With the neighbors adding their voices, the chief couldn't help but be moved. He gently helped Ella up. Good kid, let's get you to the hospital. I'll report this to my superiors. An auntie in a uniform chimed in, I'm a lawyer. I'll help you with your case. Wendy exclaimed, aren't you the lead at a famous law firm? Ella smirked, recognizing the lawyer. She's handled thousands of cases, hardly ever losing. In her past life, Ella had wanted to hire her to cut ties with her parents, but they had stopped her before she could. The lawyer had a lovely daughter, so Ella knew she wouldn't just stand by. Everything she did was to draw these people out. She was finding a way to save herself. Lying on the stretcher, she was surrounded by people who cared about her. It was the first time she felt so much love. She realized that outside of family, others could care too. The reporters surrounded her parents, asking for their thoughts. The officer shielded Ella from them, saying calmly, I came to collect an award, but instead found this. It's a blessing I did, or who knows what would have happened. He must have already looked into her life. That's why he trusted her right away. People can lie, but the signs of their life don't change. Besides, she was just 12 years old. This case received a lot of attention not only because a young student wanted to sever ties with her parents, but because she was a national competition winner, taken to the hospital by the officer himself. The whole country awaited the verdict, knowing their wrongdoings. Wendy was criticized for abusing her power, and her husband's company began losing clients, nearing bankruptcy. Mark was fired instantly, and Linda didn't dare shop for groceries, fearing people would point and call her cruel. People threw rotten eggs and veggies at them. Still, Linda and Mark didn't wake up, repeatedly calling Ella a jinx. She hung up calmly, just reading and studying quietly. But seeing potential profit, they had her grandparents call her. Grandpa's voice came through the line, and she teared up. In her past life, they hurried to see her through the line, and she teared up. In her past life, they hurried to see her one last time and died in a crash. This time, she'd warned them to stay put and that she'd visit during breaks. But they called saying, Ella, we miss you. Are you okay? She could hear her father urging Grandpa to get her to come home. But Grandma took the phone, huffing, no matter who your parents are, we'll always love you. She hung up. With them protecting her, Ella couldn't let them down. She stood firm in court, presenting all the evidence she'd collected over the years that proved they didn't care for her. With overwhelming evidence and public opinion on her side, they severed their ties. It was a historic battle and the biggest turning point in her life. Finally, they severed their ties. It was a historic battle and the biggest turning point in her life. Finally, Ella was free from them, but they were relentless, like a stubborn rash that wouldn't go away. The officer told her she'd now be cared for by the state. She'd have their full support. She nodded eagerly, promising to work hard and represent her country against other young geniuses. Years flew by. At her request, her grandparents moved to the student residence with her. If she wasn't studying, she was with them. It was the life she dreamed of until 9th grade. Ethan was diagnosed with leukemia. Grandpa stood in the hallway, trembling and shocked. She peeked at the message. Ethan has leukemia. Mark messaged again. Donating marrow isn't a big deal. She's Ethan's sister, and you're his grandpa. Can you really ignore him? Grandpa turned towards Ella with teary eyes. She's your granddaughter. Ethan is her grandson. It was tough for him. Ella spoke up. I'll donate the marrow, but that's it. That way she fulfilled her obligation to them. But Grandpa held her hand, shaking his head firmly. They hurt you. I don't want you doing anything you don't want. Anyone can donate. It doesn't have to be you. Grandma joined in. Exactly. It doesn't have to be you. Don't let us sway your decision. You're also a treasure, and there's no need to compromise for others. They hugged, crying their hearts out. In the end, Ella anonymously shared Ethan's need for marrow on an account with thousands of followers. She offered all the money they had spent on her as a reward, $2,358.65. Pretty soon, someone reached out saying they were willing to be a match. Ella looked up at the sky, feeling like she was completely done with them. After Ethan recovered, he didn't think it was a blessing from above. Rather, he smugly got her number from Grandpa. You didn't want to donate marrow to save me, but someone else did. Didn't see that coming, did you? You've always been jealous of Linda and Mark favoring me, no matter what you did or how hard you studied. They still treated her like she was nothing. He was full of himself, saying, "Even though I'm a big shot now, Linda and Mark don't regret anything and might even be disgusted by me. Like, I'm trying to make them feel sorry." But Ella listened silently. When he started to wear out, she calmly said, "You actually care a lot." I. He got mad, wanting to argue, but she just hung up. He thought he could rile her up with his words. What he didn't know was that Ella had long given up on that family. They couldn't touch her emotions. Not sure if it was because of facing life and death, but Ethan got into a hedonistic lifestyle. He started blowing his parents' money on gambling. When he got caught, he pleaded, saying he was just trying to live for the moment after almost dying. His sob story made his parents cry, so they let him be. Who knew that Ethan would be bold enough to get into drugs and gambling? In less than 2 weeks, he was beating up his parents for money, but the family's finances were already drained. How could he expect them to have money to give? When the cops came to arrest him, Ethan coughed up blood. They not only found that his leukemia had relapsed, but also discovered he had HIV and kidney failure. Faced with certain death, they cried as they called Ella. "Ella, we were wrong before. Can you send us money? Your brother is dying and has no money for the hospital. Please help him. We were at fault in the past. Can you come see him?" Looking at the calendar showing 10 days until she turned 18, Ella coldly replied, "No." They only reached out because she wasn't of legal age yet, trying to trick her. But this time, not only had she cut ties, but she was also under national protection. No way they could hurt her. Her grandparents would always be safe and sound with her. 3 months later, Ethan died from kidney failure. The parents who insisted on saving their son gave up after just a month of his relapse. Ethan, newly sick, was angrier than ever. He would constantly beat the two watching over him and cruelly threaten to infect them with HIV by cutting himself, yelling, "Why should I die alone? You made me irresponsible." Terrified, they fled the city overnight, desperately trying to find Ella. But the police guarding her weren't about to let them near her. They scavenged trash to survive, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. But Ella always took the government's vehicle through secret paths. They never crossed paths. All they could do was see her ads by the roadside. There she was, glamorous on the screen. She always had her grandparents in tow, dressed sharply, attending fancy events. Everyone said how well they raised her, and she just smiled, calmly blocking the new harassing messages on her phone. "We're really sorry, Ella. We know we were wrong. Please give us another chance, and we'll do right by you." A delayed apology was worth less than nothing. That applied just as much to family. Their daughter had died long ago on that surgery table in a past life. The person she was now only belonged to herself,